Director of Edina Defense, Annukka Ylivaara, Assistant Secretary General of the Security Committee at the Finnish Ministry of Defense, and Sara, Nanni, Spokesperson for Security Policy at the German Parliament, who is currently still voting, I believe. So she might come in the middle of our discussion, but we'll be resilient. We'll handle this, I think. What about Christian Mölling? He's also on his way. Okay. No problem. We'll manage. We're prepared for all kinds of contingencies. So, throughout the day, we've heard different perspectives already on comprehensive security, comprehensive defense. We kicked off the discussion with President Grybauskaite, who talked a lot about responsibility. In the ensuing panel, we talked about the total defense concepts in Sweden, for example. We went into different breakout groups, talked about different topics, climate and others, intergenerational issues as well. And I think there's a lot of food for thought, and we want to try to bring it together in this concluding panel. And because it's already late in the evening, we're going to try to do this a little bit as a moderated conversation. So not just the rigid input structure, a bit more of a free-flow, moderated conversation. And so I think there's three parts we want to look at. The first one is what's actually the threat environment that we need to prepare for? What do we need to be resilient against? What are the scenarios that we're looking at? Second point is, well, do we have the capacities to be prepared and to be resilient? Are we actually implementing what we need to implement, or do we have particular gaps? And then the third part I'd love to talk to you about is, of course, the question of the role of society, the role of the citizen in all of this. And so maybe, Annukka, I'll kick off with you. When you look towards 2030, what are the threat scenarios or the risks that the Finnish Ministry of Defense plans for, looks for? What are you preparing for?
First of all, thank you for inviting me here. And I was actually listening to the first breakout session, and there were quite interesting point of views. But I would like to turn out this question to a bit different angle, because authorities, they are usually blamed to emphasize all of those threats. Authorities talk about threats. But when we look about the Finnish preparedness, Finnish resilience, so the most important thing is that what are we securing? What is our aim? And in Finland, we use the concept for comprehensive security, which forms the foundation of resilience in Finnish society. And in the core of this concept is two things. Firstly, vital functions of society, those that we are trying to safeguard. And another thing, collaboration. This is a concept of collaboration. So those vital functions of society, it's a whole of society approach. It includes psychological resilience, leadership, international EU activities, defense capability, internal security, economy, infrastructure, and security of supply, and functional capacity of the population and services. None of these functions are more important than the others. But Finland, just recently, 1 year ago, we updated our security strategy for society, which describes this comprehensive security. And during this update, we emphasized psychological resilience a bit more than before. Traditionally, we depict these vital functions in the shape of a diamond. It's the Finnish diamond. So previously, on top of the diamond was a vital function called leadership. But nowadays, it's psychological resilience. This is because what we have learned from the recent crisis.
And what do you mean by psychological resilience? What exactly does that entail?
Of course, it's an individual capability, but it's society's capability to be able to cope in crisis situations, but also to recover. Probably it's the most difficult vital functions because it's not a concrete one. It is shown in the will of the population, in the trust, not only to authorities, but trust to fellow citizens. And it's definitely built before crisis, during normal times. But when we look at the threats, and there has been a lot of discussion about comprehensive defense, and in the Finnish thinking, I would like to explain the evolution of our concept. Firstly, we started as a total defense concept that developed after the Second World War. And then it transformed to comprehensive defense. And now we use the concept of comprehensive security. Total defense, that is part of the comprehensive security concept. What it means in our thinking is that when we unite those civilian and military activities or integrate them to defend the country. But in a comprehensive security perspective, the threat spectrum is a much larger, much vaster, because the vital functions are 7. So what are the threats finally? They can be diverse, arising from human action, nature, technological development. They are usually unpredictable. They can be happen alone or combined. But what is it in concrete terms? That's what you're asking.
I'd like to know.
Yeah. So in Finland, we update our national risk assessment in 3 years row. And the latest that was made 2023, there were 15 different scenarios. And just to name a couple of those, there are disruptions in health security, energy supply, food supply, to mass influx of migrants, information influence activities, and finally use of military force. But what is also included in this assessment is not the description of scenarios, but the impact level on each of these vital functions.
Wow, interesting. Well, we'll come back to that as well. Also, how that evolution actually took place and what structures you have to actually go to that. But I want to bring Sie, Herr Goltz. Sie sind.
Now I want to ask you, Mr. Goltz, you already joined the THW at the age of 17. It's not a job, it's a vocation, I would say. And in all these years, the crisis landscape has changed quite much. So what's your view of these changes of the crisis landscape? What are the crises we have to prepare for into the future? Well, I will move a bit closer to you to start with. And thank you that I can talk in German. This is, of course, a professional meeting here. And I don't want to speak in some broken English. It was in 1991 that I became a member of THW, the Technical Relief Service in Germany. And the reason for THW is that in the Constitution, we are responsible for civil defense and protection of the civil population in the German Federation. And when I was trained in 1991, I was told, okay, actually this is in view of war and the case of tension, but we don't have that anymore, and we will never have that again. In 1991, 92, 93, that was everlasting peace, which had started, so to speak. And this is why for over 35 years, or roughly 35 years, we didn't have a lot to do with civil defense and civil protection, and we were very grateful for that. We, as THW, the Federal Agency for Technical Relief, were very different in the 1950s. So going away from war specialization, we specialized in natural disasters, floods, supported the fire brigade in extinguishing fires, supporting the states and the local authorities. And, you know, we have set up our capacity for that situation. Now, upon the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, with the concept of civil defense of 2016 from the Federal Ministry of the Interior, some people were smiling, about people stockpiling things too much. So at that time, we started rethinking, namely that the capabilities we have are also needed in the case of war to protect the society. You were asking about 2030. I believe our Minister of Defense and I believe our intelligence services, if they say up until 2029, Russia will be in a position to... Hi, Ms. Nanni. Good evening. Warm welcome. So Russia will be in a position to challenge Europe and NATO. We have to be prepared for that. What we as THW do, help in natural disasters, other disasters, this is enhanced more and more in training, in preparation by everything that is relevant in the case of a military attack requiring support to the civil population. Thank you very much. Welcome, Ms. Nanni. Thanks for joining our panel. We were just discussing the question, what is it actually we have to prepare for up until the year 2030?
What do we need to be resilient for? And Lieutenant Colonel Ylivaara was mentioned also the issue of psychological resilience, and mentioned a number of different scenarios. And maybe before going to Christian Mölling, I would like to come back to you, Lieutenant Colonel. Is this a shared European understanding, talking about psychological resilience, or is this a specific Northern model?
That's a difficult question. Well, because I look at it from the Finnish and northern perspective, but probably it's more common in the Nordic countries because when we look at inside of our concept, I mentioned about the concept of collaboration and what it means. It means that the security is not only the business for authorities. It requires participation at all sectors and at all levels of society. So if we look at the previous discussions, so what I found out, the understanding is not the same here at the moment in Germany, exactly. That everybody has to participate. So, but I have to say that in Nordic countries there is also work to do. So it doesn't mean that everything is perfect. When we updated the latest strategy, we emphasized the importance of individuals as security actors. It doesn't mean that everybody at the moment is participating. We have a lot of requirements for the citizens. For example, in Finland we have a conscription system where people have to study, pay taxes and so on, but still we need people more to participate. But at the same time, when we emphasize the importance of individuals as security actors, it's a two-way road, so that people need to participate, but at the same time the society or the government needs to tell them what they need to do, what skills they need to have. And
give an orientation.
Yeah.
Christian Mölling, you've been working on security policy, defense policy for many years at the German Council of Foreign Relations, the DGAP, at the Bertelsmann Foundation, now director of Edina. Is there a shared European understanding of what the threats are by 2030? And what are those threats? What do we need to get prepared for?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, sorry for being late. I have no good excuse for this. No, really not.
We'll give you some time to think of one.
I was just taken away by the daily work at home. So sorry for that. Second, I think that the first most important point is we're talking about those kind of shocks that, as an individual, is on an individual level, you're overwhelmed by it, and you can only manage it as a society. And this is, I think, the most important point here. Do we share this understanding in Europe? I guess not when it comes to the kind of the concrete threat in the framework of military aggression. I think that's definitely not the shared thing, and this is something that we can see, that there's a kind of a relationship between distance to Russia and the question of preparedness, and also a joint history, not with Russia, but also with the Soviet Union, and the understanding of what it possibly means just to have the threat. That doesn't mean that you conclude from it the same things in terms of what you have to do. I think that's most important. That doesn't mean that, for example, the Southern Europeans are less prepared, but they are prepared for different things because they have their own challenges. So it's not
like
a question huge wildfires, huge times of dryness, things like that, where, again, on an abstract level, the challenge is always the same. You can't manage it individually, plus the state is not prepared. Because normally you would argue it's a state job that needs to be done. But then you come to the question of, so where also does the individual come in? It comes in when you recognize that the state will not be able to take care of you in a situation because it's just overwhelmed. We have this in normal civilian situations, like in data, don't know the English word for it. But I mean, we have the Katastrophen, we have the Katastrophenschutz. We have those situations when you have a situation of mass casualties, of mass injured people. And I think that one of the best examples really is where also, I think it's also necessary to have a positive notion. When this society, the German society, has managed it, was, for example, Corona. I mean, that was a huge common effort, which gives me a lot of hope for what we are able to manage as a society in cases when the state or political leadership is not fully available. Because we had the political conversation on is it right to do vaccination, etc., at the same time while people were voluntarily helping on this. And there are many other examples where I think that societies are much more resilient than we possibly currently think. There's a feeling of fragility currently, possibly, because it's so new what's coming over us. But I think it's not about the preparedness for one exact thing. I don't know whom of you is prepared at home. I mean, and when you prepared for it, does it just start that you filled up your stuff in your cellars? Even most of you may just don't have a cellar any longer where you can stock
Oder
things.
Weinkeller.
Or it's locked. Yeah, I mean, yes, we have a wine cellar, but there's other things there as well. And we did it, luckily, we did it just before Corona came. So, and it wasn't to prepare for war or something, but I thought, like, maybe it's something one now should basically do, and that was very helpful. So I think there's a lot of things that you can't foresee in terms of contingencies, but it always makes sense to imagine that there may be a longer phase where the normal life just stops. And when you have an initial phase, you have to organize yourself as an individual, as a family, as a society. I think that this is the biggest challenge that we currently have, is to find ways of organization of civil society in their very specific social context. So I guess organizing resilience in Berlin is, at a certain point, completely different compared to how I would organize it in my home village. 2,000 people, it's a completely different thing, you know, it's family life, it's established social life, etc., etc. But it can be, and I think this is the most positive thing, it can be a common challenge for the German society, because it needs everybody, every generation, male, female, whatever you want to be, otherwise it won't work. And that's an interesting thing in times when societies are kind of breaking up.
I think that's a really interesting point. The idea of being resilient for phases where normal life stops. And I think these last couple of years, we've had a couple of those phases, and those phases are becoming more frequent. If we're looking at capacities, though, Sara, I want to bring you in on this. You might have the impression reading some of the headlines, that Germany is very well prepared now. Lots of money for defense, National Security Council, new structures. What's behind those headlines? Are we that prepared, or are we moving in the right direction?
First of all, I have a good reason why I'm late. But nevertheless, I'm very sorry for being late. I had to pass a vote in the parliament. I'm supposed to do this by law. So, yes. Are we well prepared? No. Do we have the concepts and the ideas? Well, some of it, I would say. Is there a
Shift?
Mindset shift? I don't think so, to be honest. And we can understand this, maybe if I can be a bit critical already at the beginning, but maybe that's also why you invited me. Why do you think it is 2030 we should look at? We are already now having hybrid attacks on our country. We already need a mindset of total defense or comprehensive defense today. I mean, here in Berlin, some of you may have been part of the victims of the recent attack on the electricity grid. So you experienced what it means to have these existential thoughts in a major European capital. Existential because you find out that it's not that easy to connect to your neighbor if the doorbell doesn't ring because you need electricity to make it ring, and then you want to find out if the older person who's living next door is okay or not. Maybe you found out that it is an existential question if some of your health is dependent on medicine that needs cooling or stuff like this. So I think already this shows us that the mindset, even in the very progressive and forward-thinking Böll Foundation, isn't where it should be, to be honest. And government side, it's even worse, much worse, if I may say so. I'm sorry. It's true that we changed our constitution, so the government could spend more money on civil defense. They could. I don't really see they do, and especially our Minister of Interior, he thinks that he doesn't have to write concepts for civil defense. He doesn't have to give guidelines for the communities or the regions. He thinks that he can make some laws that do the bare minimum, and then others will be in responsibility. And while it's true that we have shared responsibilities among the different levels, if you do not have coordination at the federal level, you will not have a society that is well prepared for even more of those hybrid threats that we are already seeing today.
Berlin wurde angesprochen, Herr Gold.
Berlin has been mentioned, Mr. Gold, with regard to the attack against the electricity infrastructure. What have we learned from that, and where do we need to improve? Yeah, it works. Let me start with the good things. Berlin taught us that we are not lost as a society. If I see the neighbor, the help neighbors gave to each other, self-help, we're not, by far not where we want to be with regard to self-help capability. But if you see, let's knock on the door of the neighbor. Who does that at peace times? On the left-hand side in the multifamily home, and to have a look at the right-hand side in the multifamily home. Who lives there? Is that person maybe physically restricted? Is she maybe illiterate? I had a conversation with a young woman who for the first time talked to her neighbors because she was not in position to make an emergency call, not because of the electricity, but she is illiterate. And so thank God, despite everything we see in terms of disruption of societal cohesion, I'm very glad that it has worked this way. Yeah, and applause is welcome. And of course, this is challenging. This situation has been challenging, not in terms of its scale, and I'm not talking about the Technical Relief Agency, differently from it was sometimes shown. We don't need an explanation of this situation to be prepared and start our activities already at 8 o'clock THW. The electricity stopped at 6. So from 8 on, we have been on site because we were in training and exercises anyway. I'm not saying we are just great as THW. We too found that in fuel logistics, we need the money you mentioned, and which we, thank God, through this constitutional amendment will receive. This year we will get 2 million euros more. So finally we are in a position to procure a certain amount of things we could not procure up until last year. I don't want to digress. So we need things at THW where we have to invest additionally, and fortunately we can do that. Of course, we have to discuss the assignment of responsibilities. It's obvious that also in Berlin there are districts. Berlin is a German state, and the Berliners will know that. I believe that this electricity outage, and it was an attack, it was not just an outage, so that this attack has shown in which respects improvements have to be applied in managing this crisis. And this applies to everyone, no matter whether at federation, state, local level. Crisis communication, information to the population. This is something where we have to perceive and see and accept. I think we have already accepted it, that not the professional organizations and the policymakers alone and the administrations alone can manage and negotiate these things, but that 83 million people in Germany are part of the picture of managing such crises and getting prepared for them. It's no use if a siren is started and no one in this room doesn't know what this siren call means. It's no use if a cell broadcast is shown on the phone and then you see, no, it's not an outage, but it's the end of the outage and you have to press that first to see that. So you receive the alert at night at 10, but it's not an alert, but it's a de-alert. So this is, of course, no good because this creates even more unrest in the population. I'm usually tempted to say it's a drill. No, for those who were affected, it was not a drill. Everything else but that. But we are well advised to not just talk about individual political things, who was where at what time, but to really look at all levels and see what can we learn from this deployment, from this attack. And for all levels of organizations, there's enough to do. It wasn't a scandal. It was no disaster in the sense of we couldn't manage that. But there are situations where not just a small part, where just a small part of the population is affected. It was a small part of Germany, of course, but we have to be prepared for different scale situations, and we can learn a lot from it.
Actually, societal cohesion and that mindset shift. And Finland seems to have made a lot of progress in that mindset shift. But Annukka, maybe you could tell us, how did you get there? I mean, or are Finns just born with that kind of mindset?
Well, we have a bit different geographical location compared to other countries, and also our history that teaches a lot. But so there is this historical memory, and there, in a way, there are structures that support this kind of mindset. But I think the key is that how we have been able to integrate all the different ministries to this common goal. So you asked me in the beginning, how does the Ministry of Defense see the future threats? that's not the most important question. The most important question is how does Finland see the future threats? So if we look at our concept, so in the core, more vital functions, diverse threats, but how we will secure those vital functions. We have a definition of strategic tasks. So in our concept, there are 56 strategic tasks, and all of those tasks are assigned to a specific ministry. And the definition of strategic task is that it's based on legislation, but it's confirmed by agreements and complemented by voluntary activities. Why it is confirmed by agreements? Because most of the vital elements are in private hands, so we need agreements. But we also need the participation of organizations and citizens, those voluntary activities. But just to give you an example of these strategic tasks so that you get an idea what I'm talking about. So when we look at the military tasks, so the strategic tasks that are on the responsibility of Ministry of Defense, there is only 2 of those 56 tasks, military defense and coordination of total defense, which is, by the way, one of the new strategic tasks included in our strategy because of the current developments in our security environment. Previously, it was enough to emphasize military defense, but now we need to emphasize the coordination of total defense, even though it has always been the responsibility of Ministry of Defense, but now it's lifted as a strategic tasks. But a couple of, may I continue,
sure,
please?
You can.
So when we look at the Ministry of Interior responsibilities, for example, protecting the civilian population, rescue services, only a couple of examples. When we go to another corner, safeguarding energy supply, maintaining the cooperation model for cybersecurity. When we come to social and ministry responsible for social and healthcare, there are ensuring access to social welfare and healthcare system. Ministry for Education and Culture, for example, number 56, maintaining cultural services and protecting cultural heritage. Not a traditional security task. And for all ministries, communications. So it's a diverse composition of strategic tasks.
And that is all coordinated within a coordinating structure, right? Because that's one of the things that we heard here is that there's a lot of lack of coordination, it seems, in Germany when it comes to these different governance levels.
It is coordinated, but in Finland the structure it's structured so that the ministries are quite independent in their specific sectors. So basically, they need to coordinate the activities together with the other ministries. So, and when we go from strategic level to operational level, so there, in most cases, there isn't a need. When we look at the response activities, in most cases, there isn't need for strategic decision making, but the authorities start to operate. And only when it's really a bad situation, as during COVID-19 pandemic, then we needed those strategic activities, such as legislation and so on. So that was the first time when in Finland the state of emergency was declared after the Second World War.
Wow. Christian Mölling, do we need to become more Finnish here in Germany?
No, I think we can't. It's basically something where if one of the key drivers is the society, then you basically have to take the starting point where the society is. We are not socialized like the Finns are since 100 years into this world. So this is not this mindset shift is something you can wish for, but if you want to have something realistic, I think that's not what we. I mean, I would quote. Maybe that's a good starting point. I would quote our chief of the army, Christian Freuding, who said we should be ready to fight tonight. And if you transfer that, it basically means, what you have is with what you go into the conflict. We are already in a part of the conflict, you're right. Doesn't feel like this. It's not a shooting war, but it's an ongoing intimidation that we're seeing. And I guess it's something where, again, everybody can do even tonight something to be prepared for something that can happen tomorrow. Supermarkets are open until, I don't know, late, so you can go and buy your stuff, and possibly better you do, because you don't know when the next pandemic or something else will come around. And I think that's it's something that it's also a positive thing, because the other thing is that as an individual, I guess many people just feel overwhelmed by the number of threats and the intensity and magnitude. So it's also something where I think it's very important to give individuals and society ownership back and the ability and the impression that you can do something. It's so important, because otherwise you may even give up. And that's the worst thing that you can basically, that you can achieve in this situation, that people give up and say, what should I do? It will come no matter what I do. No, that's not true. We still can master our destiny to a certain extent in this regard.
Earlier we had the parliamentarian Agnieszka Brugger here, and she said that oftentimes people tell her, you are scaring people by mentioning just what you said right now. We have to prepare to fight tonight. So how do we strike that balance between not scaring people and at the same time being, I don't know, realistic and preparing them?
Yeah, I think that the second part is not only to scare people and then say, but here's what we can do. And that's the part what is currently missing. I think political communication on the very strategic level has changed in Germany from a very laid-back position at the beginning of the Ukraine war to a now more forward-leaning government, also from the Chancellor's office. I appreciate that, but to operationalize that and say, and here's what you can do, and make it, again, a positive vision of how society can basically grab ownership again. So, it's something which is an important part of the equation also towards our adversaries, to show that this country becomes more and more unconquerable. Then it becomes less attractive. It becomes more resilient. Resilience means to be unconquerable by any kind of threat you have.
So part of deterrence then as well. And that's something
Absolutely.
that Benedetta Berti mentioned as well. Sara, I want to bring you in here and ask, how do you communicate these risks? And just mentioning this balance that Christian mentioned, that Agnieszka Brugger mentioned, about not wanting to scare people, but at the same time being realistic. And the question of what is a positive vision of resilience?
First of all, everybody who is watching the news is scared, no matter what I say. Really, no matter what I say. Everybody who's watching the news daily is scared sometimes. And the question is, do they also get prepared sometimes? And how to prepare? We try to push a maybe too complex idea, I don't know, for the German discourse, but in all respect for the official institutions who are in charge for civil defense, there are a lot of people out there who have skills that this community of people in Germany will need in times of crisis. And we proposed that there's some kind of voluntary registration for everybody who thinks that she or he has a skill and also has the will to be part of a solution in times of crisis. So if you have special IT knowledge, if you have medical background, if you are good in crowd management or communication, if you have psychosocial education that makes you a good soother for other people and stuff like this, so that the official institution, in times of crisis, they know, okay, in Düsseldorf, we have 20 people who are really good at building things. And for some reason, we need to build things. So we have their telephone numbers, we can call them, and maybe 10 of them or 5 have the time to come over, because they do not have to care for other people in this crisis, or are building already on their own behalf something that should be built. And then they come over and they help. And this is a very simple thing. You don't need to change a law for that.
You just need to empower people.
You just need to set up an app. You just need to set up a homepage You can even ask some artificial intelligence to make sense of the set of skills that people are putting into the system. And then this would be available in times of crisis. And if I do it on a voluntary basis, you do not even have all these ideas about data management, blah, blah, blah. You just agree, yes, I'm gonna help. And then you're gonna help. And I think those simple ideas that would work tomorrow or in a week or in 10 days, we need those simple things. Because, I mean, 2030, I already said, the military and many experts are talking about 29. I don't think Putin is waiting for 29, but let's say 29. This is 35 months. I know how much I can do in a month. I'm scared if I imagine that we only have maximum 35 months to get things done. And that's also why I'm really, really focusing on the ideas that would help tomorrow, in 10 days, in 2 weeks, if we build them up. Yes, we should talk about reforms, responsibilities, but let's be honest, we don't have the time for the perfect structure to be finalized. We don't have that time. If we do, because it turns out Putin is gonna die tomorrow, whatever, it's okay. But probably we don't have the time. So maybe we should really focus on what could work. We had some information this morning about the medical situation and how the hospitals have to prepare. And the timeline wasn't really a thing in this discussion. And I think this is very dangerous. Because of course, if I have a blank paper and a blank country and whatever, I can imagine that how many things we could do to really be well prepared. And then it's 2040 or what? I really want to make this point. If anybody here is in a position of power, maybe in the ministries or wherever, the timeline is short. Behave accordingly.
We have a lot of catching up to do. I want to open. Christian, you want to come in? Yeah, please react.
One point to add.
And then we'll open the floor for Q&A.
In terms of, I think it's true that this is a civil society dimension. I think there's a second part which goes to those preparations that are necessary for the specialized organizations, and in whatever kind of material and personal reserves that you basically need. And I think this is also the element where we can develop political leverage by doing the similar type of planning that we do in the military for the civilian defense. So having a benchmark, knowing just simple things. How much fire brigades do we need? And then say, okay, how much do we have? And that's what we, and this is the way how you basically get leverage on the defense spending. And I think you can do the same thing, literally the same thing, in a little bit more complex way for the civilian side as well, because I guess all the specialized organizations that we have in Germany know what they need in principle. So they can make at least a probable assessment of what is needed, and that is a bill that you can prepare as the benchmark that you have to reach. And then you put the timeline to it, and out of this you very simply get the number of orders that you would have to put, and the number and the amount of money that you need to put behind it. The big problem is, at least me personally, I don't know whether this is happening on all the different levels, and that's a problem already. If we don't have it, we should have it rather immediately. And if we have it, then we should start communicating this also immediately, because this is the biggest leverage that we have towards at least the parliament and the federal government. Even if they say we are not responsible, at least you have the hot potato in the game where everybody then has to find a way to, put it to somebody else. Otherwise, the whole communication will just die away. It's a nice pet project. It doesn't cost that much money. So you need to get people possibly more interested by making the problem more transparent and bigger, and also have something also economically into it.
Herr Gold, und dann öffnen wir für Fragen.
Es tut mir nur leid für Sie.
Yeah, I'm sorry for you. Actually, we should have a kind of a battle. There should be different positions, but in fact, we do agree. I mean, we could write lots of theses about the optimum civilian protection system or disaster protection system in Germany, but we don't have 5 years. So we have to make do with the time and the structures we have. And what I'm having here covers about 80% of what needs to be done. This has been issued by the Federal Agency for Disaster Protection. Now, this also applies to air attacks. I mean, we haven't reached the point at which we should be, but we are much more advanced than we were 5 years ago. Because then we were hesitating to really consider a war situation. At the time, had we said war, people would have criticized us harshly. But, I mean, we should take this brochure, publish it 40 million times, give it to each and every household in the country. I mean, some people are afraid or feel fear when they see this, but I don't feel fear. I feel fear once I realize that I'm not prepared. I'm not fearing the war. I'm fearing the fact that I'm not prepared when the war starts. So this is a brochure. You can also get it online, by the way. Not everybody knows. I mean, we all know it, but we are in a bubble. And this is the problem, too. We are in a bubble, but it's 82 million people who need to know about it. And we have to talk about it. Once we have this foundation, professional organizations, paid ones or voluntary ones, can do their job because we have the basis. We have a sound basis. Everybody has to ask themselves, when did I do the last first aid course? And there are some people who go and say, well, yeah, quite a while ago. So then you know what you can do tomorrow morning.
So, we have 9 minutes on this panel, so we'll open up the floor for questions, comments, answers. I will collect a couple. Please introduce yourself. Also say who you want to address. We'll start with you, sir, in the second row here, and then move over to the middle.
My name is Wolfgang Rudeschauser. I worked for EU, NATO, and the German government, and I'm now a non-resident fellow at the Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy in Germany. I have a question that hasn't come up yet, und ich sage sie auf Deutsch, weil sie
I will say it in German because it has a specific German connect and also a specific German history. One of my colleagues is conducting research into the physical fitness of the German population, especially of the young population. And he compares this with Poland, Finland, other countries. We all see that the German population, especially the younger generations, are less and less physically fit. And if we take a look at 2030, and I think it's now that polls are conducted for the military, that is for voluntary, obligatory military service, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to ask you, Mr. Gold, does this really play a role in the emergency services and their organizations or others, how the physical fitness of the German population, to be more specific, of the young population, is evolving? I don't want to quote Pete Hegseth and heroes in America and all women to the military, etc. I just really want to ask the question also about the perception of the audience. Would that be a subject for research? Okay, let's collect some more questions or comments. Then just pass the mic to the rows behind you. I'm Julia Denke.
Yeah, my name is Julia Denke. I'm an independent consultant for peace questions and work also as a conflict trainer here in Germany. My question is, when the media is only fear-mongering and not activating the society to prepare, and when the government is not stepping up and doing so itself, how can we activate the people back at home that are not present here today and are not really aware of what the threat actually is? And this is a question for everybody, so you choose yourself who's going to answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Julia.
Right, thank you very much. I'm Emil Archambault with the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Auswärtige Politik. My question would be mostly for Sara, Nanni and Annukka Ylivaara. One challenge at the moment is that there is a lot of catching up to do and ramping up capabilities. That's what we've mostly been speaking about. There's also the challenge then of maintaining those capabilities in the long term, and that is a different requirement. That's a different way of organizing work. We know that with infrastructure, with any kind of structure, there is a challenge of not getting a sort of fatigue and not letting these capacities decay. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit about how we do that to make sure that we are ready not only now, not only in 2030, but also 2035, 2040, 2045, and so on. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll take one more question if there is one. Yes, in the second row here.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Antonia Brandt. I study security policy here in Berlin at the Hertie School. First, I want to make a note because we've been talking a lot about fear or being scared. I wrote my bachelor thesis about the question in what ways or what factors influenced people's support of weapons deliveries to Ukraine. And actually one big factor, if not the biggest factor for support, was the threat perception when it came to Russia. So people who felt that the threat was stronger, more imminent, they supported actually the policy of sending weapons to Ukraine. And I think that, you know, fear, if you want to call it that, or you could also call it awareness for a threat, can also serve quite, you know, as a catalyst for action. And I think we could also turn our perspective more towards that. I have a question for Sara, Nanni. What can the Greens do currently in their position, in the opposition, to work, you know, more towards everything that you have just talked about? What are specific action points that you are going to take in the next weeks and months? I'm interested in that.
Great, thank you. Okay, Herr Gold, wir fangen mal mit Ihnen an der Frage.
Okay, Mr. Gold, let's start with you, the question of physical fitness. Central Europe has an obesity problem overall. This is just an issue. And this is why I'm always pleading in favor of one subject at school being nutrition, but this is just on a sideline notice. I have the problem that my elevator is not working since yesterday night. I live on the 7th floor, and you know, I get out of breath because my nutrition is not optimal today. And when I take a look at our assistance organizations and THW, then it's right. We're saying everyone can join us. But then there are cases where you do need a certain physical fitness. For example, if you wear a respirator, if you do things like that, you need a physical exam, you need to have a certain certificate, and you must have certain physical fitness to be able to help with these things. So this would really be an interesting field to be addressed and researched into. But overall, how do we live in Central Europe? What is the diet of our societies in Central Europe? This is also a subject we should bear in mind and dedicate attention to. Ms. Nanni, what
abilities and not falling into fatigue?
I don't know how we should fall in fatigue. I mean, we have the news every day, every week that make us not fall asleep for these kind of matters. And coercion from other states via hybrid threats and attacks is continuing even if Russia is defeated, hopefully soon. Via China and maybe also via the United States. I don't know, we will see. I don't fear that this society will have some kind of fatigue when it comes to becoming more resilient. I see that politicians are more of the problem, not so much the society, if I may say so. So I don't really fear that, to be honest. And on the other hand, also, I don't think it's very reasonable to speculate about the kinds of threats we are going to face in 20 years or in 15. I mean, artificial intelligence has evolved so much since I'm in Parliament, and I'm in Parliament only for 4 years. There are different kind of threats I couldn't have imagined 4 years ago. Maybe some people could. But even those people who were talking so much, yeah, artificial intelligence is going to change our life, they would not have predicted the concrete ways of how this could threaten us. It's helpful in many ways as well, but you know what I mean. So I think preparing now for later is more of how to find a way of working on these kind of resilience issues in a flexible, agile way, and to be fresh in your mind rather than building structures or taking decisions that have an effect in 20 years, because maybe in 20 years the world looks very different. And of course, I will not tell you what the Green opposition program will be in the future, because I know that the government coalitions are listening to my talk here as well. So we will have some surprises for that. But I can tell you what we did in the past, try to bring to the debate next to our idea of having this registration. We are proposing that there's an inquiry commission in the German parliament that asks the question, what kind of voluntary or maybe not so voluntary rules, procedures, whatever, do we have to establish in this society to be more resilient? So short-term, voluntary, quick fix, but then also we should take the time, and this is not a job that the Greens can do alone, although I know we would do it very good, but we need a society consensus about this. So we are proposing that together with the other democratic parties, there should be a discussion in the parliament together with the society to say, okay, maybe we have to find requirements on you have to do your first aid training every whatever year, or you have to register if you have specific capacities. Maybe if you studied medicine and now you're working for the pharma lobby, we are very happy for your very good salary, but also we invested a lot of money in you, so maybe you should give something back in times of crisis when you studied medicine. All these kinds of ideas, we have to talk about it, discuss it together with others, and we will, in this year, make a proposal to the other party groups so that we're going to have this inquiry commission in the next years and find structures that, if we do have more time than 2030, we will do it a bit more structured, maybe. Thank you.
Annukka, Julia asked, how do you activate those people who don't necessarily know all the risks? Or doesn't Finland everybody know?
In our DNA. No. You have to approach people through those channels that they use. So, and I always like to talk about education, educating also children, because that is where everything starts. Of course, if you are looking for like a couple of years of perspective, so then there isn't enough time. But my advice is to use those channels that people use. But there is also communication by words and communication by actions. If people see that authorities together are exercising, they are involving the organizations, they are involving the voluntaries and so on. So that's also a message. But I totally agree what Christian said about this. Do not scare people too much, because the biggest threat is ignorance. And if people don't see a future, they don't pay attention, because Why? Why should they?
Christian.
Any question, or should I just put out a watching list?
You can take the question of catching up, maintaining capabilities, and the fatigue coming in, possibly from DGAP, your former home.
I think that this is a very simple, a second-order question. I mean, capabilities that we don't have to think about how to maintain them. So our first problem, also because of the time frame, is just to get the stuff. And I do another kind of similarity that we currently have in the military domain is we are buying the hell currently, and we will make mistakes in what we buy. And the same will happen for the civilian side. However, the innovation cycles, at least for the hardware, are not that much the problem as they are compared, because you're not getting into a competition and into a combat where you basically have to be the first. It's a more diffuse situation. And I mean, if you take a look into the equipment fire brigades use today, yes, there's always a higher end that you can achieve. But compared to my time when I was a young civil servant, it's not that much that has changed since then. A lot of the procedures change here and there, it gets more efficient, but it's still something where with a reasonable amount of equipment, you can do still quite a lot, but you need a lot of the equipment. And you need a lot of educated people who can basically do it. And I think a lot of, maybe it's one idea is maybe do more live exercises. You know, invite people to just take a look on what we are able to do and how we do this. I mean, again, I'm from a small village. That was pretty normal for us, right? To have that. And people, you know, especially if you are young, I think you don't need necessarily to press people into the service. I mean, you offer an opportunity to be part of something bigger, which is, especially if you're in your 20s, it is something that is pretty normal. You want to be part of something bigger and do something good. So just give the opportunity to do so. Yeah, and don't make it a kind of an obligation. We have to go.
And I think that's the positive vision, empowering citizens to actually play a role themselves, contribute to resilience, not be something that needs to be forced to be resilience, because you're contributing to something greater than yourself. We are also, in terms of times, greater than ourselves, 6 minutes, a little bit over time. I'd like to thank all of you for your patience. I'd like to thank our panelists. And before we finish, I'll pass the floor also to Vera one more time.
Danke, Roderick. Ich weiß, ich stehe jetzt.
Thank you, Roderick. I think I know it's me who's between you and the buffet. This is why I will be brief. Still, wrapping up this conference, I would like to thank everyone warmly who participated in this conference. Many thanks to the speakers from at home and abroad. Thanks for being here. Thanks to the other half of the Foreign and Security Policy Desk, Philipp Staub, our moderators, Anna Brem, Helena Quist, Yannick Hartmann, Roderick, Kefferpütz for their great support, to Policy 180 for the great cooperation, and nearly most important for the success of this day, the conference office, Florian Voss and Lukas Lorenz, the service, Nicole Bodstream, and hardware, Philip Mayer, and the interpreters, as well as Marlene Heine. Without all of you, this conference would not have been possible. And finally, I would like to thank especially you for attending, for your attention, for your questions, and we hope to see you back to the Foundation very soon. In this sense, I wish you and all of us a nice rest of the evening. Thank you so much, and see you soon.